They were just two black teenage girls, sitting in first class, smiling, following every rule. So why did the airline staff ask them to leave the plane? Why did their silence make others uncomfortable? And what happened after their father, an unshakable CEO, picked up the phone? This isn't just another story about discrimination. This is about power, about what it means to have a voice, and what happens when that voice shakes an entire industry. Would things have gone differently if they weren't the daughters of a billionaire? Why were they singled out, despite valid tickets, documents, and perfect composure? What began as a weekend leadership trip turned into a national reckoning. And what these sisters did next left the world speechless. So before we dive into this emotional and powerful true story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Because this is more than a story. It's a movement. Let's begin. The airport was humming. At Ashland International, the early morning rush carried a rhythm of its own wheels gliding over tile. The hushed buzz of gate announcements, the aroma of cinnamon rolls mingling with jet fuel, and the occasional burst of laughter from over-caffeinated travelers. Seated near gate C-17, Mira Benton gently adjusted the strap of her backpack and glanced sideways at her twin sister. "Still nervous?" she asked, her voice soft but amused. Kalia rolled her eyes. A familiar move. Not nervous, just overthinking again. They exchanged a small smile. It was their thing teasing with tenderness. At 16, the Benton twins carried the kind of quiet confidence that didn't demand attention but always held it. They wore matching charcoal hoodies, jeans cuffed just above their sneakers, and identical braided hairstyles pulled back into neat buns. Except for their personalized enamel pins, Mira's read, "Let people be soft," Kalia's challenge. Everything. The differences were always in the details. This morning, they were traveling to Seattle to attend the National Youth Ethics Forum, a prestigious leadership summit for teens across the country. They'd both been accepted months ago, thanks to essays filled with fire, community projects, and teacher recommendations that praised their integrity. It wasn't their first time flying, far from it, but this was their first time flying alone. No chaperone, no assistant, no dad, just them. And while that made Kalia just a touch restless, Mira found it exhilarating. "I think it's good for us," Mira said, unprompted. "You know, navigating everything by ourselves. It feels like we're leveling up." Kalia raised an eyebrow. "Leveling up. Are we in a video game now?" Mira nudged her. "Shut up. You know what I mean." They laughed, just a short burst that turned a few heads but didn't linger. In the middle of the terminal, among a sea of strangers, they had built a quiet little island of calm. Across the waiting area, a gate agent, an older woman with auburn hair and a silver name tag that read Marcia, was scanning passengers. Her gaze lingered on the girls a second too long before she returned to typing. Mira noticed it, briefly, and chose not to mention it. The twins' first-class tickets had been a gift from their father, Dominic Benton, founder and CEO of Orion Aero, one of the fastest-growing aerospace startups in the country. But unlike many kids born into wealth, Mira and Kalia weren't raised to flaunt it. If anything, their dad was obsessive about keeping them grounded. "There's privilege," he often said, "and then there's what you do with privilege." So, no entourages, no designer labels, no cutting in line. They flew commercial like everyone else and, when possible, by themselves. Dominic believed in strength earned through independence, not hand-holding. It was part of the reason why he had encouraged them to attend the forum alone. Part of the reason. The other, he was in Geneva, finalizing a tech partnership that could change the future of sustainable aviation. He'd called earlier that morning, his voice gravelly but warm. "You girls have everything. ID boarding passes. Snacks. You know how I get when I worry. We're fine, Dad," Mira had said, patient as ever. "Okay. Proud of you. Call if anything feels off." "Okay, I don't care how small. We know." She didn't know then just how much that call would matter. Final boarding for VentureJet Flight 912 to Seattle. All passengers. Please proceed to Gate C Infinin. The announcement rang out above them. Ready, Kalia stood, slinging her tote bag over one shoulder. Mira followed, pulling her carry-on behind her. They joined the first-class boarding line, which wasn't long, just a man in a blazer texting furiously, a woman with a baby, and two elderly passengers speaking French. When they handed over their tickets, Marcia scanned them with a smile that felt too tight. "Unaccompanied?" she asked lightly, without making eye contact. "Yes, ma'am," Mira replied politely. "But we've got all the forms filed. VentureJet staff signed off at check-in." Marcia didn't respond, just nodded and waved them through. Mira hesitated for a beat, a prickle of something not quite fear, not quite annoyance running up her spine. But she moved on. Inside the cabin, first class was softly lit, almost tranquil. Cream-colored seats with wide armrests, quiet music playing overhead. The twins found their seats 2A and 2B by the window. Kalia slid into the aisle seat and stretched her legs. "Not bad," she whispered. Mira chuckled. Dad really did go all out. Their flight attendant, a woman named Lara Thorne, approached them shortly after takeoff prep began. She looked mid-30s, strawberry blonde, with a tidy bun and a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning," she said, scanning the row. "Just the two of you traveling today?" "Yes, ma'am," Mira replied. "And your guardian." Kalia sat up straighter. "We're traveling alone. Our dad filed the unaccompanied minor paperwork." Lara gave a tight nod. "I'll double-check that with the purser. Just a moment." She walked off without another word. Mira and Kalia looked at each other, the weight of something unspoken settling in the space between them. Kalia murmured, "That was weird." Right, Mira didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the book in her bag and told herself to breathe. The boarding line for Pacific Air Flight 1193 crawled forward in steady rhythm, a quiet murmur of wheeled suitcases and last-minute gate announcements humming in the background. First-class passengers were already being ushered in, the red carpet flanked by velvet ropes and polite smiles. Dr. Amira Langston stepped forward when her group was called, calm, composed, and dressed in a charcoal gray knit travel set with minimalist gold accents. She looked every bit the modern professional. Her white sneakers were spotless. Her black hair was pulled into a soft bun. No flash, just function. But beneath that quiet exterior was a woman built from steel. She held out her phone to the boarding scanner, the 1A, first class glowing clean and bright on her Pacific Air app. The beep was clean, but the pause was deliberate. Colleen Brask, the lead flight attendant, stared down at the phone. Her painted smile didn't flicker, but her eyes narrowed just enough to reveal the thought behind them. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right lane?" Her voice was sweet, syrupy, the kind that stings more than soothes. Amira looked her in the eye. "Yes," she said simply. "Seat 1A, behind her." A woman in pearls and a Chanel blazer leaned in, chuckling. "Oh, sweetheart," the woman said with a tone dipped in venomous honey. "This is first class." Amira didn't turn around. She'd heard that tone too many times before in boardrooms, interviews, even casual dinners where the wine flowed freely and assumptions ran unchecked. I know, she said quietly. Colleen's fingers moved across her tablet with unhurried disdain. Strange. You don't seem to be showing up on the roster. Amira raised her wrist and tapped her phone again. The system scanned it. Must be a glitch, Colleen replied, with the kind of smile that says not really. You may want to check with the gate agent. Another passenger behind them cleared their throat, impatient. The line was backing up. Amira stood still, calm, centered, but inside, something clenched. Not because this was new, far from it, but because it was too familiar. She remembered being 12, standing in a private school hallway, holding a math trophy twice the size of her head, while a substitute teacher asked, "Who did you steal that from?" She remembered job interviews where they marveled at her resume, but never called her back. She remembered being called articulate in a room full of Ivy League graduates. And now, this, not surprising, but exhausting. I'm not confused, Amira said, and I'm not moving to economy. Colleen's expression chilled. Excuse me, my ticket is valid. My boarding pass is confirmed. My seat is 1A. You can scan it again if you'd like. The screen above the kiosk suddenly blinked. The boarding confirmation vanished. In its place, see it not assigned. Amira tilted her head slightly. Did you just remove me from the manifest? Colleen gave a theatrical shrug. It's the system, not me. A soft scoff from the Chanel lady. Maybe she's flying standby. Amira's grip on her phone tightened just enough to feel it, but her voice never rose. Is there a supervisor available? She asked. Colleen stepped forward, dropping her smile. You're creating a disturbance. If you can't step aside, I'll have to call security. A few more passengers turned to look. The murmurs started low, uncomfortable. A man in a gray business suit smirked. Here we go again. Another whispered. She doesn't look like first class. Amira took a breath. Long, controlled, not for them, for herself. She thought of her daughter, Neve, who had whispered last week while braiding her hair, Mommy, you're the strongest woman I know. She thought of her father's funeral, where not one tech executive who had praised her breakthroughs in public had shown up. She thought of her mother's last voicemail. You don't fight to be seen. Amira, you build something they can't ignore. Her thumb brushed over the smooth surface of the black jade ring on her right hand, a custom wearable she and her engineers had designed. Not for style, for signal. One tap. The pulse beneath the surface was faint, silent, but it traveled. To a server, to a private relay, to someone on board watching quietly. Her eyes never left Colleen's. I'll take my seat now, Amira said, and stepped forward. Colleen blocked her with one arm. You're not on my list. Amira didn't respond. Not to her. She looked past her, down the aisle of the aircraft into the quiet echo of the cabin that had welcomed her kind of silence many times, but never her kind of skin. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to show them something. And soon, they'd see it. The plane had been airborne for less than 30 minutes, but something felt off. Mira Benton noticed it in the way the service slowed when it reached their row. How Lara's smile thinned every time she passed. The air wasn't hostile, just colder. Kalaya, on the other hand, had gone from restless to visibly irritated. She crossed and uncrossed her legs, checked her phone even though airplane mode was on, tapped her fingers against the armrest in soft, annoyed rhythms. What is taking them so long with the drinks, she whispered. Mira just gave a quiet shrug. She wasn't thirsty anymore. Eventually, Lara returned with a tray. But instead of setting it down, she stood awkwardly, shifting her weight. "I'm sorry, girls," she said. "I need to speak with you both for a moment." Kalia blinked. "Okay, it's about your seating." Now Mira turned her full attention to the flight attendant. "Our seating?" she asked calmly. Lara cleared her throat. "There's been some confusion about your travel category and cabin assignment. We may need to relocate you to the main cabin." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Mira blinked once, slowly. "We paid for these seats," she said. "Well, our father did. First class, unaccompanied minor form, all filed and approved." Lara nodded stiffly. "Yes, and I'm sure that's all in order. But we have guidelines around unaccompanied minors in premium cabins, especially when there's no guardian traveling with them. Some passengers have raised concerns." Kalia sat upright, hands gripping the seat. "Wait, what passengers?" she asked. "Who's concerned about two teenagers sitting in first class?" "There's no need to raise your voice," Lara said quickly, her smile now almost gone. "I'm not raising my voice," Kalia replied, voice shaking. "I'm asking a question." Mira gently placed a hand on her sister's arm. "We'd like to speak to your purser." "Please," she said. Lara didn't respond at first. Then she gave a slight nod. "I'll return shortly," and she walked away. The moment she was out of earshot, Kalia leaned in. "This is insane. Mira, what is this?" Mira didn't answer right away. Her eyes were trained on the aisle, watching Lara whisper to a man with dark, slicked-back hair. He looked like a senior crew member. The purser, probably. His name tag read Jonas Bell. Passengers were starting to notice. A few looked over their newspapers. Others leaned slightly into the aisle. A woman in row 4 discreetly began filming something on her phone. Of course she did, Mira thought. This is how it spreads now. Not through words, through lenses. Jonas approached their seat slowly, almost as if dreading what he had to say. "Good evening," he began, polite but clipped. "We're currently working through a seating protocol issue regarding unaccompanied minors in the first-class cabin. I'm afraid we'll need to ask you to temporarily return to the front gate with us while we sort it out with ground personnel." Kalia gaped, but Mira's voice was quieter. "You want us to deplane?" "It's just for clarification," Jonas said quickly. "We'll sort it out as quickly as possible." "We didn't do anything wrong," Kalia snapped. "No one's saying you did," he replied, the defensiveness in his voice betraying guilt. "It's just standard procedure." "Which standard?" Mira asked gently. "Can you show it to us?" He faltered. "I don't have it with me, but I assure you you're removing us because we're minors." She asked again, this time firmer. He didn't answer. That was the moment. That split second of hesitation, of avoidance, of retreat. It confirmed what Mira already suspected. This wasn't about protocol. It was about perception. Another voice cut in. It came from behind them. "The woman in 4A. You're seriously pulling them off the plane?" she asked. Voice sharp. Jonas turned quickly, flustered. "Ma'am, please remain seated." But others were murmuring now, too. Not loud, not aggressive, just confused, unsettled, aware. "Come on," Jonas finally said, gesturing toward the front. "We'll handle this quickly." Mira stood, slowly. Her limbs moved with practiced control. She reached for her backpack and coat. Kalia followed, still fuming, lips pressed into a hard line. As they stepped into the aisle, all eyes followed them. Every single one. Mira could feel it, the weight of stares, the questions, the silent judgments. why are they being pulled off that no one had the courage to say aloud? She straightened her shoulders, walked with calm, and told herself over and over again, "You did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong." At the cabin door, Lara waited with a gate agent already on the radio. The door closed behind them with a mechanical thunk. Just like that. They were no longer passengers, just a problem to be handled. The terminal was colder than it had felt before, or maybe Mira was just numb. She and Kalia stood silently beside the glass windows of Gate C-17, staring out at the plane they had just been removed from. The engines were still idling, the jet bridge still attached, their seats 2A and 2B still empty. They should have been buckling in, preparing for takeoff. Instead, they were being treated like a problem, a risk, an exception. A gate supervisor approached tall, pale, well-pressed blazer, holding a tablet like it was a badge. His name tag read Harlan Quinn. He stopped a few feet in front of them. His voice was polite. His tone was not. "Good afternoon," he began. "I'm the gate supervisor for VentureJet. I've been told there was some confusion about your status as unaccompanied minors in first class." Mira nodded once. "Oh, we're not confused," Kalia added. "We've flown first class before. Alone. Many times." "Yes." "Well," Quinn replied, glancing at his tablet, "our crew flagged some concerns. Apparently, there was discomfort expressed by other passengers and crew about your presence in that cabin." Silence. Then Kalia's voice, low and sharp. "Our presence made them uncomfortable." He didn't answer right away, just tapped the side of his tablet. "It's a complicated situation," he said finally. "No," Mira said. "It's not." She spoke without heat, without trembling, just truth. "We had valid tickets. We had all our documents. We were seated, quiet, respectful, following every rule." She paused. "And yet we were removed." Quinn shifted, discomfort breaking through his practiced posture. "There's protocol," he insisted. "When someone raises a concern, especially about minors, we have to take it seriously." Kalia crossed her arms. "Concern about what?" "Exactly," he hesitated, and that was answer enough. Mira stepped forward slightly, her voice steady. "If we looked different, if we were two blonde girls from Connecticut, would we still be standing here?" Quinn's eyes flinched. His lips parted, then closed. "I'm not here to debate hypotheticals." "No," Mira said quietly. "You're here to enforce them." A few feet away, a traveler was filming. "Again," she whispered to someone beside her. "This is the same flight. The same girls." Kalia turned toward Mira. "Should we call Dad?" Mira paused, then nodded. Kalia pulled out her phone and stepped aside, fingers shaking as she tapped her father's name. Mira remained face to face with Quinn. "I want you to know something," she said. He looked up. "This is not going away," Kalia returned. "He's calling the airline right now." She said, "Dad's furious." Quinn blinked. "Excuse me." Your father, Mira, met his eyes. "Dominic Benton." The change in Quinn's face was instant, like a trap door beneath his feet had just opened. Mira watched it happen. Watched the realization that they hadn't just removed two black girls from a plane. They had removed the daughters of the man who controls over a dozen national gate agreements. A man who, with one phone call, could reroute entire flight networks. And Mira knew then this wasn't about protocol anymore. It was about panic. I'll check with our regional director," Quinn mumbled, already turning away. "No rush," Mira said flatly. "We're not going anywhere." The twins sat down again, side by side. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Kalia whispered, "Why do we still have to prove we belong? After everything." After doing it all right, Mira looked straight ahead. Because belonging, she thought, was never about paperwork. It was about permission. And some people still didn't want to give it. Outside, the plane began pulling away, their seats still empty, their hearts pounding with a quiet fury. Not loud, not showy, but sharp and steady. Dominic Benton was 36 floors above the city of Geneva when his personal phone buzzed. He almost didn't answer. He was in the middle of a video call with aerospace executives leaders from Europe and Asia, smiling through fragile agreements and guarded handshakes. Then he saw the name Kalia. He excused himself, walked out onto a terrace, pressed accept. Dad Kalia's voice trembled, like it was holding back something sharp. Dominic stood still, shoulders tightening beneath his tailored suit. The wind off Lake Geneva cut across the glass building, but he didn't feel it. "Tell me what happened," he said. Mira took the phone from her sister. Her voice wasn't trembling. It was clear, measured, but low. "They pulled us off the plane. Dad said there was confusion about us being minors, but that's not what this is." Dominic's jaw flexed. "Did they raise their voice?" "Touch you, no. Nothing loud. Just quiet punishment, like we were a mistake. And you had your documents. All of them." He closed his eyes, breathed once, then said, calmly, "Stay right there. Do not speak to anyone else. Do not argue. Don't apologize. I'll take care of it. Dad, don't worry about being polite," he said. "Just stay safe. I'll call you back in 5 minutes." He hung up, then he dialed. First, his assistant, then VentureJet's corporate switchboard, then a direct line to Monroe Ellis, CEO of VentureJet Airlines. It was nearly midnight in New York. Monroe answered on the second ring. "Dominic," he said, voice gravelly. "It's late. What's wrong?" "You need to explain," Dominic said. "Why 2 of your employees just removed my daughters from a flight they were legally and properly booked on." Silence. "What flight?" 912. Ashland to Seattle. First class. Mira and Kalia Benton. Wait, Dominic. Why, they had everything. Forms, tickets, etiquette. And still someone decided their skin and their age made them a problem. Let me check with my team. It may be a misunderstanding. You and I both know it's not, Dominic said sharply, then added, colder. You remember how much real estate Orion Aero controls at U.S. airports, don't you? I do. Good. Because this isn't just about my daughters anymore. This is about every black child who's ever been made to feel they don't belong in a first-class seat. Back at Ashland International, the twins sat on a faux leather bench by the windows, watching another plane taxi in. Their flight had left without them. Just gone. Kalia hunched forward, arms on her knees. I feel sick, she muttered. Mira didn't respond. She was holding her phone in both hands, staring at the screen. Not scrolling. Just waiting. When it buzzed, she jumped slightly. Dad. She picked up. Dominic's voice was calmer now. But behind the calm was fire. I just got off the phone with Monroe Ellis, he said. He's waking up his entire operations team. I gave him 2 options: handle this internally with integrity and speed, or watch me dissolve VentureJet's gate access at 3 of the busiest East Coast airports. The line went quiet. Then he added, You 2 will be treated with respect. Starting now. Dad, Mira said quietly, I didn't want it to get this big. I know, he replied, but it's already big. Dominic stared out at the dark lake, eyes narrowing. "This is about more than a mistake," he said. "This is about what kind of company they're running, what kind of world we're accepting." He paused. "And I won't let my daughters be used as someone else's lesson without consequences." Inside the terminal, Kalia was refreshing her Twitter feed, slowly, then faster. She froze, then turned the phone to Mira. A video was already gaining traction. Over 50,000 views. Title: "These two black teens got pulled off first class." Guess why the comments were flying in? Some in support, some full of hate, most confused, and now the whole world was watching. For the first time, Mira felt it. Not just the sting of what happened, but the weight of what came next. This wasn't just about getting back on the plane. This was about forcing an airline and a nation to look itself in the mirror. The gate was quiet. Too quiet. Mira could hear every footstep that passed behind them, every low murmur from staff behind the counter, every buzz of her phone. But none of it felt real anymore. She sat beside Kalia, their knees almost touching, both watching the same video on repeat. Them, being asked to deplane, being walked back into the terminal, no yelling, no commotion, just two teenage girls, pulled aside like misplaced luggage. The audio was grainy, but the caption was sharp. They didn't look like they belonged in first class. And suddenly, the world was watching. Within an hour, venture jet bias began trending. First, it was small Twitter accounts, advocacy pages, high school friends, community organizers. Then it spread, fast. A journalist from the route tweeted two black girls. First class, pulled off a flight. Airline claims, protocol. I've heard this story before. Every time, it ends the same, until someone fights back. Watching this closely, a well-known author reposted the video, adding, "This is why representation matters. This is why we tell our stories." CNN, BuzzFeed News, Teen Vogue, and Travel Weekly all began requesting interviews. Some of the responses were kind, outraged, compassionate. Others were cruel. Kalia was scrolling furiously. Her hand trembled with each swipe. "Look at this," she whispered. "Some random person says we probably caused a scene and got what we deserved. Another one says Dad's using money to bully the airline." Mira didn't look at the screen. She was still staring out the window at the tarmac. "They don't know us," she said. "They never did. But they think they do." Kalia muttered. Across the terminal, someone snapped their photo discreetly. From behind a pillar. Kalia caught it. Her eyes narrowed. "We're being watched like animals in a zoo. We're being watched like symbols." Mira said, "People want to make us mean something. Victims, villains, privileged, powerless." Kalia turned to her, voice raw. "What are we?" Then Mira met her gaze and answered honestly, "I don't know yet." Behind the counter, Harlan Quinn was on the phone. His face flushed, sweat forming along his collar. The staff around him whispered, checking their phones, visibly rattled. A younger gate agent leaned over. "She's the CEO's kid," she asked quietly. Quinn nodded stiffly, and they kicked her off the plane. Another nod. "Why?" the girl asked, confused. Quinn didn't answer, because by now he knew. It wasn't about policy. It was about fear. Fear of passengers who didn't match expectations. Fear of admitting the policy wasn't the problem. Then came the call. The desk phone rang, piercing the tension. Quinn answered, face pale. "Yes. Yes. She's still here." "Understood." He hung up slowly, walked toward the twins, cleared his throat. "Mira, Kalia, we'd like to offer you seats on the next flight to Seattle. First class, lounge access, meal vouchers." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, and the twins could see it. This wasn't remorse, it was retreat. Mira stood, calm as ever. "Because we called our dad." She asked. Quinn blinked. "Excuse me. If we didn't have the last name Benton," Kalia added, "would we still be waiting? Would we even have been removed in the first place?" Quinn hesitated, then said, "Let's not escalate this further." Kalia almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mira folded her arms. "Then don't pretend this is hospitality," she said. "This is damage control." They took the tickets, not because they trusted the offer, but because they needed to get to Seattle. The National Youth Ethics Forum awaited them, and if ever there were a time for ethics to matter, it was now. In the lounge, they sat on leather seats under soft golden light. Nearby, businessmen scrolled through news apps. A family argued quietly in Spanish. Someone from corporate had sent down a tray of chocolate-dipped strawberries as an apology. Neither girl touched them. Kalia pulled out her phone again. Mira touched her arm. "Don't read any more," she said. "Not now. I just want to know how far it's gone. You already know." Kalia looked up, eyes tired. "What if this turns into something we can't control?" Mira leaned back in her chair. "It already has." But in her heart, she knew the truth. Sometimes stories spiral, but sometimes they reveal. And maybe this time people would finally be forced to see. The gate agent at 49B smiled too much. She looked young, maybe 23, and her voice shook slightly as she scanned the twins' new boarding passes. "Welcome aboard, Miss Benton." "Miss Benton," she said, nodding to each of them. "We have you in seats 1A and 1B today." Mira offered a polite smile, while Kalia gave a barely there nod. It wasn't that they were ungrateful. It was that they were tired. Not physically, but tired of pretending things were normal when they weren't. Tired of carrying invisible weights that no one seemed to acknowledge. They walked down the jet bridge again, but this time it felt different, like returning to a crime scene. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the quiet shuffle of feet behind them, the faint scent of fuel and stale coffee in the air. Everything sharper, heavier. As they stepped onto the plane, a new face greeted them. "Good evening," said a warm, gentle voice. "Welcome aboard." The speaker was a black woman in her 40s, with locks pulled back into a bun and eyes that radiated compassion. Her name tag read Celeste Harmon, and something in Mira's chest loosened just a little. "Thank you," Mira said softly. "If you need anything," Celeste added, "please don't hesitate. We're glad to have you." They took their seats in the front row, Kalia by the window, Mira on the aisle. They didn't speak for a while. Celeste came by with water and ginger cookies, and unlike the previous flight crew, she knelt slightly so she could speak at their eye level. "I heard about what happened," she said gently, "and I want you to know not everyone here is like that. I'm sorry you were made to feel small." Mira blinked quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. Celeste smiled, then moved on. But her presence stayed like a protective shield. The plane filled slowly. A few passengers gave the girls quiet nods of recognition. One or two avoided looking at them altogether. Mira caught a whisper. "Those are the girls," followed by a shushing sound. Kalia stared out the window. The engines began to spool, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard VentureJet Flight 914 nonstop service to Seattle. Estimated flight time 5 hours and 12 minutes. We'll be pushing back shortly." As the wheels lifted off the runway and the city below shrank, Mira felt her throat tighten, not from fear of flying, but from the weight of everything unspoken. A few rows back, a pair of business travelers were talking in hushed tones. Heard the CEO got involved, could cost VentureJet big money, real gate access drama, all over 2 girls in first class. That last sentence made Mira flinch. 2 girls, as if that was all they were. Not students, not daughters, not individuals, just a headline. Kalia turned toward her. "I keep wondering," she began, voice barely audible. What if Dad hadn't picked up the phone? Mira looked at her. "He always picks up." "That's not what I mean." Kalia's eyes welled slightly. "I mean, what about the people who don't have a dad like ours, who don't have that kind of pull, who just get left behind?" Mira didn't answer right away, because she was thinking the same thing. They were safe now, in first class, again, on the flight they were promised, with apologies and vouchers and smiles. But what about the ones who weren't recorded, who didn't trend, who got quietly erased in terminals every day? A voice interrupted their thoughts. "Celeste again. Can I offer you anything? Tea? Oh, blanket." Mira smiled faintly. "Just quite as good." Celeste nodded, understanding more than Mira said. "I'll keep an eye out." As the cabin dimmed, Mira leaned her head back. Her heart still beat too fast. Her stomach still churned, and despite her calm exterior, she could feel it, that strange, growing conflict between gratitude and grief, between being vindicated and being seen too late. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted to fly without proving she deserved to. And as the plane soared above the clouds, Mira realized something simple and painful. Altitude doesn't change the pressure. It just hides it under silence. Back in New York, the skyline glowed with late evening light as office towers blinked to life. Inside the penthouse headquarters of Apex Aero, Dominic Benton stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, phone to his ear, eyes locked on the clouds. His reflection stared back at him, calm, controlled, and furious. On the other end of the line was Monroe Ellis, CEO of VentureJet Airlines. "Dominic," Monroe said, "we're working on a formal statement. We're deeply sorry about what happened. I assure you, it wasn't policy, it was human error." Dominic said nothing. He didn't need to. "Listen," Monroe continued, his voice tight. "We value your partnership. We've operated out of your gates at Newark, Charlotte, and Phoenix for years. Surely we can find a way to make this right without overreaction." Dominic turned from the window, walked slowly to his desk, opened a file folder marked Gate Access Agreement, VentureJet plus OPEX. He said, quietly, "I'm not overreacting." A pause. "Then what do you want?" Monroe asked. Dominic sat, folded his hands, and answered, "I want a public apology to my daughters. I want every employee involved suspended immediately pending review. I want a policy overhaul on how you handle unaccompanied minors and implicit bias training mandatory for every crew member, coast to coast." "That's a lot," Monroe muttered. Dominic's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. "You made a lot of mistakes." Then came the blow. "If I don't see a public statement within 24 hours, Apex will begin dismantling VentureJet's gate access at our properties." Monroe's breath caught. "You're bluffing." "No," Dominic said. "I'm correcting." The call ended. Dominic leaned back in his chair. Not smug, not satisfied. Just resolute. He didn't want revenge. He wanted change. And if that change required shaking the ground beneath a billion-dollar airline, so be it. By the next morning, Twitter was ablaze. Apex Ultimatum was trending worldwide. News anchors debated the ethics of corporate retaliation. Some praised Dominic as a father who stood up for his daughters. Others called him a wealthy bully. But one thing was clear. VentureJet was on the defensive. Onboard Flight 911 tour cruising at 35,000 feet. Mira and Kalia scrolled through the headlines. CEO threatens to pull gate access over racial discrimination incident. Power meets prejudice. What happened on VentureJet Flight 912? The day a phone call changed the airline industry. Kalia looked up from her screen. "He really did it," she whispered. "Dad actually pulled the lever." Mira stared out the window, clouds drifting below. "Yeah," she said softly. "But now what?" Because the weight of it wasn't thrilling. It wasn't empowering. It was heavy. Kalia bit her lip. What if innocent people lose jobs? Mira nodded slowly. "I've been thinking that too." They weren't celebrating. They were grieving. Not for themselves, but for what had to be lost in order for someone to finally listen. A soft knock on the armrest broke the silence. It was Celeste. "I just wanted to let you both know," she said gently. "We'll be landing in about 40 minutes. I also wanted to thank you." Mira blinked. "For what?" "For standing up. Most passengers just take it. But because of you, things might actually change." Mira gave a weak smile. But inside, she didn't feel heroic. She felt conflicted, frustrated, and still very, very tired. As the plane began its descent into Seattle, the cabin lights brightened, seat backs straightened, and Mira whispered something Kalia barely heard. "I didn't want to break the system." Kalia leaned closer. "But maybe," she replied. "It needed breaking." The wheels hit the runway with a soft bounce. Flight 913 coasted down the tarmac, slowing against the pull of gravity. The city of Seattle rose beyond the windows, glass towers shimmering against a cloudy sky. Their reflections fractured across rain-slicked concrete. Mira inhaled slowly. Kalia exhaled through her nose. They were here, but it didn't feel like an arrival. It felt like an unfolding. Over the intercom, the captain spoke. "Welcome to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Local time is 5:42 p.m. On behalf of VentureJet, thank you for flying with us." The cabin filled with the usual rustling seatbelts unclipping, phones buzzing, voices rising. But Mira and Kalia didn't move. Not yet. Because Celeste, the flight attendant, appeared once more, this time holding a clipboard and a discreet earpiece. "There's press waiting at the terminal," she said quietly. "And airport security is holding a perimeter near the gate exit." Kalia stiffened. "They're here for us." Celeste nodded gently. "It's a zoo out there." The girls exchanged a glance. Mira asked, "Can we leave another way?" Celeste smiled knowingly. "We've arranged a side corridor. You won't be seen." Relief passed over Mira's face, but it was short-lived, because no matter how they exited, their faces were already everywhere. As they stepped into the jet bridge, flanked by 2 airport escorts, Kalia muttered, "This is so weird. I feel like we're fugitives." "No," Mira said softly. "We're exhibits." They bypassed the gate exit entirely, funneled through a discreet hallway used by pilots and VIPs, no windows, no noise, just pale green walls and the hum of motion-activated lights. At the end, a man in a charcoal suit held a small placard. Benton, Nyef. He was a representative from the National Youth Ethics Forum. Their conference, their original purpose. He gave them a soft smile. "Ladies," he said, "your car is waiting." Outside, rain misted over the pavement. The black sedan was sleek, quiet, and warm. As they slid inside, Mira finally exhaled. But her phone buzzed again, and again, and again. She glanced down. CNN father of teens removed from Flight Issue's ultimatum to airline giant. BuzzFeed News, who are Mira and Kalia Benton 5. Things to know about the teen sisters who sparked a corporate crisis. NYD op-ed justice or privilege when power intervenes. Kalia scrolled her own feed. "This is insane," she whispered. "Someone tagged us in a drawing. A digital sketch of us in first class, heads held high." Mira stared out the window. "Did they get our faces right?" Kalia hesitated. "Close, but not us." "Right," Mira asked. "Not who we really are." The car slowed in front of a downtown hotel. Volunteers in conference polos greeted them with polite applause, already knowing who they were. "We're so honored you made it," one whispered. "You're an inspiration," another said. The girls nodded, smiled, said thank you. But Mira felt hollow, because it wasn't supposed to be this way. Inside the elevator, alone again. Kalia leaned against the mirrored wall. "Do you think this is what Dad wanted?" All the attention Mira thought about it, then shook her head. "No, he just wanted to make sure we were okay. But now the whole world knows our names." Mira didn't respond. She didn't need to, because Kalia already knew what she was thinking. Fame wasn't something you earned. Sometimes it was something that happened to you. And once it did, it changed the story forever. That night, in their hotel room standard, beige, sterile. They lay in their beds, scrolling in silence. Mira paused on a tweet. "They look so calm, like they've been through this before." She read it 3 times, then whispered into the dark. "We have been through this before. Just never with cameras." Across the room, Kalia was crying quietly. Mira didn't say anything. She just got up, climbed into her sister's bed, and held her. And for the first time since it all started, they let themselves feel the ache of being loudly erased and then violently seen. The ballroom shimmered with soft light. Polished floors, rows of pristine white chairs, stage draped in deep blue. A banner above it read National Youth Ethics Forum Leadership for the Next Generation. On the 3rd day of the conference, Mira and Kalia Benton were invited to join a closed panel session titled Voice and Power. The ethics of speaking up. They didn't sign up for it. They hadn't even responded to the invitation. But when they walked into the room, every head turned, because now they weren't just attendees. They were symbols. The other students, high-achieving teens from across the country, were kind, warm, and curious. They introduced themselves gently, like one would to someone grieving. One girl said, "You're so brave." Another added, "I'm glad you made it through." And while Mira nodded politely, inside, she wanted to whisper, "We didn't survive a war. We got off a plane." But she knew it wasn't about the plane. It was about what the plane represented. During the panel, the moderator turned to them. A woman in her 30s, smart blazer, kind eyes. "Mira, Kalia," she said, "your story has sparked national conversation. What do you hope people take away from this moment?" Mira looked at the mic in front of her, paused, then said, "We didn't ask to be symbols." Her voice was calm, but it carried through the room. "We're just students, daughters, teenagers, who bought tickets, followed the rules, and still got treated like a threat." Kalia added, I hope people realize this isn't new. It's just visible now. Because someone filmed it. Because our last name made headlines. The room was still. One student raised a hand. How did it feel to watch the world talk about you? Mira swallowed, then said like drowning in a reflection you didn't create. After the session, people approached them, not out of fandom, but solidarity. 2 students from Georgia shared their own story of being followed in an airport gift shop. A girl from Oregon said her brother was removed from a flight after a miscommunication turned into a threat. It wasn't just the Bentons. It never was. Later that night, back in their hotel room, Kalia sat cross-legged on the carpet, holding her phone like it might bite. "There's another article," she said. "Some columnist says we're leveraging privilege, that Dad weaponized wealth." Mira stayed quiet for a long time, then said, "Maybe they're right." Kalia looked up, stunned. "What we do have privilege. We had a safety net. Most kids don't." "But maybe," Mira said slowly. "That's exactly why we had to say something." She leaned forward, voice low, honest. "Because if the world only listens to power, then power needs to speak." They sat in silence. The hum of the city buzzed faintly beyond the glass window. And in that moment, they knew this wasn't just about one flight or one airline. It was about 1,000 invisible moments never recorded, finally becoming undeniable. And while they didn't want to be symbols, they could choose what the symbol meant. It was past midnight when Mira finally called her father. The city outside their hotel window was a patchwork of orange streetlights and blinking signals. But inside, the room was still just her, Kalia, and the quiet hum of tired hearts. The phone rang twice before Dominic Benton answered. His voice, when it came, was soft but worn. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Dad." Pause. "How's the conference?" "Good." "Hard." "Strange." He waited. He knew that tone. It meant something deeper was coming. Kalia sat across from Mira, watching silently, arms around her knees. Mira continued, "Dad, we need to talk about what's happening." Dominic's voice was steady. "Okay, you've made your point. The media's paying attention. The airline is cornered. But now, people are scared." She hesitated. "Some VentureJet employees reached out to us. Quietly, they're worried. About losing jobs. About their families." Another pause. "We just don't want to be the reason someone innocent can't make rent." Dominic didn't answer at first. Then he exhaled. "I understand." His voice was rougher now. Not with anger, but with ache. "You know why I did it?" "Right." "Yes," Mira whispered. "Because I've spent decades in this industry watching people like you, like your mother, be treated like shadows. Overlooked, mistrusted, and it never changed. Not until something cost them." Kalia leaned closer to the phone. "Speaking now, we know. Dad, we do. But maybe it's time to find a middle ground. Punish the ones responsible. But don't dismantle the whole system." Dominic sighed again. "You sound like your mother. It wasn't a joke. It was a compliment." Then quieter. "Okay? Tell me what you're thinking." And so, Mira did. She outlined a compromise. Disciplinary actions for the specific staff involved. A public apology, not just to them, but to all passengers who felt silenced. A partnership with civil rights and ethics organizations to audit and retrain personnel. A pause, not a full pullback on gate contracts, contingent on real reform. When she finished, the line went quiet. Then Dominic spoke. "That's not easy." "We're not asking for easy," Kalia said. Just He chuckled faintly. You girls are good at this. At what Mira asked. At reminding me why I fight. In the background, the clock ticked forward into morning. And in that still moment, Dominic Benton, the CEO, the father, the man with unmatched influence, let himself be led by his daughters. Not just in anger, but in wisdom. Later that morning, a joint statement appeared across news platforms. Apex Aero and VentureJet Airlines have agreed to a joint initiative aimed at rooting out systemic bias within the air travel industry. The airline will begin immediate review of unaccompanied minor policies, suspend staff involved in discriminatory incidents, and launch an independent inclusion task force led by ethics advisors. Apex Aero has paused its gate agreement terminations pending compliance review. Mira and Kalia read it together, side by side, Kalia whispered. Do you think it's enough Mira didn't answer right away? Then nodded slowly. It's a start. And sometimes, a start is the most powerful thing in the world. The conference was over. Name tags collected, luggage packed, handshakes exchanged. But Mira and Kalia Benton didn't feel like they were returning home the same way they left it. They had arrived as students. They were leaving as a story. Not one they asked to tell, but one they now owned. In the hotel lobby, a girl from Chicago hugged Kalia tightly. You reminded me I don't have to be quiet, she said. A boy from Arizona clasped Mira's hand. My little sister watched your interview. She cried. She said she saw herself in you. Mira blinked away tears. So did he. Outside, the car waited to take them to the airport. Not a black sedan this time. Just a van, simple, ordinary. And somehow, that felt better. As they slid inside, Kalia turned to Mira. Do you think people will forget, she asked. Mira smiled faintly. People always forget. A pause. But that's not why we did this. Back in New York, Dominic Benton sat at a roundtable discussion televised live on CSPN. To his left, civil rights attorneys. To his right, airline executives. In front of him, the future of the industry. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply said, My daughters are not a PR crisis. They are proof that even when you do everything right, some people will still see you as wrong. That must change. Within weeks, the changes began. VentureJet suspended all involved staff. Mandatory bias training was rolled out to 7,000 employees. Gate access reviews were standardized across multiple carriers. And most significantly, the Unaccompanied Minor Equity Act, inspired by Mira and Kalia, was introduced in Congress. It was small, it was procedural, but it was real. Back at school, life crept toward normal. Almost. Some classmates were awkward. Some were impressed. A few were jealous. But the girls had grown past the noise. They weren't trying to win anyone over. They were just trying to be. At night, Mira wrote in her journal, her pen slow, her words unpolished, but honest. I still think about that first gate agent's face. The way he looked at us, not like he saw who we were, but who he assumed we couldn't be. She underlined that sentence twice, then wrote, But now the world sees us differently. Not better, just clearer. One morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Just a folded sheet of paper with clean, blocky handwriting. Dear Mira and Kalia, I worked the desk the day you were pulled off that plane. I didn't stop it. I just watched. I've never regretted something more. I'm sorry. I'm learning. I'm speaking up now. You made me braver. Thank you. S. Kalia taped the letter above her desk, right beside the photo of them at the conference. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Mira just gave her hand a squeeze. Sometimes change starts loud. Sometimes it starts with two teenage girls quietly choosing not to disappear. Because in the end, it wasn't just about one flight. It was about every flight after, every gate, every moment where someone asked themselves, do I speak up? Or stay silent, and maybe now, more people would choose to speak. That was the ripple. That was the revolution, not made of noise, but made of clarity. Mira and Kalia never set out to change the airline industry. They only wanted to fly. But when the world told them to sit down and stay quiet, they stood up. Not with shouting, but with grace, truth, and a father's fierce love. Their story isn't just about injustice on a plane. It's about how quickly dignity can be stripped away, and how powerful it is to demand it back. It reminds us discrimination doesn't always come with slurs or violence. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in politeness, policies, and pretend smiles. But silence isn't the answer. And privilege isn't something to hide from, but something that must be used responsibly. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect, or reminded you of your own battles, leave us a comment. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, because more powerful stories are coming. Together, let's keep asking the hard questions. Let's keep standing up, and let's keep pushing for a world that truly flies on equality. We'll see you in the next video.